And so since the enactment of the act, the board has transferred 19,000 acres to Department of Agriculture. Emma will tell you later there are probably about 100,000 more acres that are eligible for transfer under the act, but they have not been transferred either because Department of Agriculture doesn't want them, or our department wants to retain the resource value. And so that has been the issue for many years. The lands that the department wants to retain are generally these large pasture tracts on the Big Island and Maui. They account for tens of thousands of acres. The change in our approach is that we're willing to take a recommendation to the board to transfer the large pasture tracts with some protections, and those protections will be in the executive orders that transfer the lands. We'll put reverter clauses in that say if the lands are no longer used for agriculture or pasture purposes, they'll come back to this department. And we'll also put in language as much as we can to preserve public access over trails and roads. A lot of the leases that were issued for the big pasture tracts carved out those kinds of access routes for public purposes. And so we'll preserve those as written into the lease and try to continue them for any future lease DOA may issue on the land after the current lease expires.
So our proposal to retain some areas is consistent with what the legislature has also agreed to. Just to show you kind of a maps of where these areas are. Again, pink is what we seek to retain, and blue is what we're offering to transfer, and red is what we already have transferred. Just on Hawaii Island, you can see, some of these major regions up in kind of the Keanakolu area along Mana Road, that Kauai corridor zone in Waimea, Momoela area. As we mentioned, we want to retain areas that have native forests. That would include some of these areas you can see in Kapapala, Kona, and then that other parcel above Hilo Forest Reserve that, as you can see, has lots of endangered species as well and is right next to all of our native forestry areas.
I did go out and visit several of these large pasture leases, in particular Kapapala, and Lonnie and Bill are here. And I did visit KK, Jerry, and Jason Moniz on the Big Island. I will share personally, I was very impressed by their stewardship. They are managing these lands really well. Many of their lands straddle, or their boundaries straddle forestry lands. But there was no doubt in my mind that these are good stewards. They are not wasting, they are taking care of the lands. What I didn't want to see happen is that the land gets subdivided into gentleman estates. I am convinced that these landowners are not going to do that, but they also understand that's going to be the condition of the executive order.
Kapapala is 163 years old. More history than we can. But with that said, we've been so focused in the last decade on these pasture leases, just focused. But Kapapala started handing forestry lands back in 1906, 1916, the national park, 1930, Kapapala Forest Reserve, 1990, the Kapapala Koa Canoe area. The ranch has been, I tell you, first, you cannot run any livestock where you're trying to reforest. And so, while everybody's focusing on these pasture leases, let's look in the rearview mirror. Let's go back and look at those lands that were taken in 1906. What do they look like? Are they really supporting the watershed or the forestry that we expected? Or maybe those management practices need to be adjusted too.
There's been some public misperceptions out there that transferring lands from DLNR to DOA means that we're taking lands out of conservation. In actuality, these are already lands that are in agriculture, like you saw. And I would actually argue that transferring these lands to DOA gives them more of an opportunity, more of that stability and that confidence to be able to put more investment into conservation practices. The ranchers do not want to participate in deforestation. Most of them are looking for ways to add trees, to increase forestry where it makes sense so that it protects the land, but they can still continue with their operations. Their cattle operations is what brings in the money so that they can continue to responsibly steward these lands.